Most of the designers that I've met have had some kind of a head start, thinking about art classes growing up, design electives in high school, maybe even a mentor. Ian Deloney had none of that. No Adobe, no sketchbook, no connections, just the feeling of being the worst designer in the room and a decision to do something about it. While everyone else was polishing up their portfolios, he was grinding 3 new projects a week just to catch up to his peers. While people waited for opportunities, he cold DM'd his idols, mailed photo calendars, and built relationships from scratch. And 2 years later, his work is on the shelves at Target. His name is in rooms he used to dream about, and his career completely built by hand. This is not a story about talent. It's a story about hustle, about betting on yourself when no one else will. Today, we're sitting down with Ian Deloney, the undrafted designer who refused to stay on the bench. He's going to talk to us about freelancing, networking, and what it really takes to build a career out of nothing. But before we get into it, I'm Ziggy the Designer. I'm a graphic designer who's worked alongside some of the world's most recognizable brands, including United Airlines, Target, and Stanford University. If you like the conversations we're having on this channel, be sure to support the show by giving this episode a like, leaving a comment down below, and of course, by subscribing. Let's get into it. So, Ian, for a lot of designers, the journey starts in college. You were self described as the worst designer in the class. And I'm curious, what makes you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like when I first got into graphic design, I was about halfway through college. And at that point, when I started my first class, I'd never opened an Adobe program before. And I didn't have any background in kind of the traditional art of drawing or painting or anything like that. And so when I got to my first class, I looked around, I'm like, half these people already know how to graphic design, and the other half that don't know how have a good foundation in like drawing or painting or a traditional art form. And I had neither of those. So yeah, I mean, I had photography kind of as a background, and there was some translatable skills there. Not much though. So I was pretty much starting from ground zero and had to learn everything starting right there.
What kept you going when you didn't feel like the most talented in the room? Because being in those art and design classrooms, it could be a little intimidating when you're doing like a critique or when you're talking about your work.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I'm really big on trying to find the best mindset I can have in any situation. And I think being really bad at something can either be demoralizing or it could be inspiring. And I just chose for it to be inspiring and chose to see it as an opportunity with kind of like a no ceiling, like there's endless possibilities. And when you're starting from ground zero like that, you can really determine whatever path you want to go on and go at it with however good of a mindset you want. And so I chose to have a positive mindset and looked at it as a big opportunity for myself.
Yeah, it's like the only way you can go is up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then, you're starting to put the work in. What was the point where you started to feel like you were catching up to your peers and you weren't, the worst in the class?
Yeah. So, like, after that first semester, like I said, I was starting from round zero and it was really difficult, to start. And so that first summer, I was pretty determined to come back that next semester not being so bad at this. So what I did was I made 3 design projects per week of summer for myself to kind of complete. And that was a way for me to just learn how to use the programs better, number 1, but then number 2, just get more educated on like what makes a good design good and just also see kind of what's out there because that first semester I didn't even know anything about logos or typography or anything like that. So, yeah, I did 3 projects per week of the summer just based on the kind of design work that I wanted to do. So, I would make up a fake music festival and design the lineup and all the merch and stuff like that. And then the next week, I would design like a coffee brand with the logo and the packaging and all that stuff. So, I did that 3 times a week for the whole summer, and then I came back that second semester feeling a lot more, kinda leveled out with my peers. Still don't think I was that good, but I definitely didn't feel as lost as I felt that first semester.
So then that's a lot of work to put in over a single summer.
Yeah.
So did you notice like a big difference between when you started and when the summer was over?
Yeah, there's a huge difference because when I first started, I know one of the first things we learned was, like, how to use the pen tool in Illustrator. And that was, like, so difficult for me. I remember one of our first assignments, they basically gave us, like, a connect the dots, and you had to, like, just trace curves and stuff using the pen tool, and I, like, could not do it for the life of me, and so that next summer I came back, that was the one of the things I focused on a lot, and, like, that skill in particular felt a lot more natural, and I understood kind of how these tools worked. Whereas, like, the first semester, I didn't even know what the tools were. And then once I found out about them, I didn't know how to use them. And so by the time I came back, I kind of had a better understanding of, how things work. So I wasn't like very good at them still, but at least I knew like what these tools were and I knew kind of a path I could take to get better at them.
Well, fast forward here. You graduate and you go to a creative agency in Minnesota called Social Butterfly.
Mhm.
What was that first taste of real design work like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great experience. I freelanced a little bit throughout college, and that's how I got the job at Social Butterfly. They were one of the first clients I took on for freelance. But I feel like when you graduate college, a lot of creatives want to go right into freelancing because they want that freedom, and it's very appealing when you're that young. And so I'm glad that I did not go that route right out of college because I thought it was a great way to get a lot of the real world experience without the pressure of having to figure out how to run a successful business right out of college. And so I think that was really valuable for me. And it introduced me to a lot of big projects. Like I had a goal the year before to work with Gary Vee. He was one of my idols at that point, and I got to work with him at Social Butterfly. So it allowed me kind of a taste of how to land a big client like that and then the work that comes along with it as well. And then also just things like I designed my first real logo for a client there, and what I mean by real is like it actually got printed for the sign outside their building and stuff. So there's a lot that goes into that. And I didn't have that experience prior. I designed maybe one or two logos for a friend and it just didn't go anywhere. I didn't have to figure out, does this work for print? Does this work on a business card? And so getting those experiences right out of college without the pressure of it landing all on me was super helpful and allowed me to try more things with confidence, I think.
That moment where you see your work in real life, that's such a special moment. What was that
Yeah.
like for you seeing the logo on the sign?
It was awesome. I mean, it was like there was definitely some hiccups along the way, like the way I designed the logo, I didn't think that it was going to go on like the side of a building, and I also just didn't know what you need to consider when you're designing a logo like that. So there's some hiccups along the way. I had to kind of like actually redesign it once they said they were putting it on a building. They were like trying to get it printed, and there was like some issues with how I designed it. So it was a little nerve wracking, but by the time it actually got to the finish line and the client was happy and it was posted on their building, it was super rewarding. That was the first time I saw my work printed in any way at all. And I was like, wow, it's really cool to see it go from your computer to actually the side of a building.
Yeah, I think that's like a shared experience that every designer, all of us designers have, where we all sort of know that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great to have that first taste of it, and like I said, not having the pressure of it falling all on me allowed me to, get out of my comfort zone a little bit and try things that I probably wouldn't have tried if I was taking the safe route and doing it myself.
Yeah. So, you spend some time at Social Butterfly. Then you moved to Iconic, which is an art gallery in Arizona, now in Los Angeles. And That's a pretty, like, decent switch um, in what you're doing, so this is actually where you really got to be part of building something from the ground up. What did you learn about the entrepreneurial grind from your time at Iconic?
Yeah, I mean, Iconic was the first time I really worked under like a tried and true successful business owner. Because when we were at Social Butterfly, my friend that owned the agency, his name's Brandon, he was about the same age as me. And so we were young, like early 20s. And, we were just trying to figure it out. We didn't have some experienced, older business owner that kind of could show us the ropes. Like we were just shooting from the hip with everything, and trying to figure it out. And so that was the biggest difference between my experience up to that point and Iconic. Iconic had been pretty successful for a couple years at that point. And so I was able to get kind of a look under the hood of how to run a successful e-commerce business. And it just taught me a lot about how to take an idea and make a real profitable business from it. And there's so many things that I didn't even know about before going there. For example, like licensing artwork and having, strategic partnerships and all these things that I never had experienced. I got to experience firsthand at Iconic. And so it's really helpful in all those ways.
After being agency side and in-house with um, those first 2 jobs after graduation, you went freelance in 2023, which is still considered pretty early in your career, and, that was at a time when the design job market started to get a little shaky.
Mhm.
Why make the jump?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it wasn't my plan. When I left Iconic, I was planning to find a job at like a tech company or like Fortune 500 corporate type job. And so I was applying and just kind of in the meantime, I was like, I could take on freelance projects to take the pressure off a little bit of the job search. And I got good job offers, but by the time that I had got those offers, I had already landed a couple of freelance projects, and they were like 10 times the price that I had ever charged before. And so it's kind of like eye-opening. You know, I felt that I was like skilled at what I was doing, but I didn't have the confidence to pitch high projects, and so the fact that I got those 3 or I got those 3 big projects by the time I got the job offers, I just felt like, there's no right time to go freelance or go independent, but it felt close enough to where I just took the leap and turned down those job offers and just kinda went all in and started my business that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big leap, right?
Yeah.
So
It was
what
scary for sure. It's like I mean, you have somewhat of a plan, but you obviously can't plan for everything, and like I said, it wasn't even in my plan to go freelance, so it was one of those things where I just kinda put a feeler out there and, some things came back, and I just felt like it was time to trust myself and put some of that knowledge I've earned to work.
so then what about freelancing kept you up at night at the start? It's such a big change. You're pretty much relying on yourself here. What were some of those things that kept you up?
I think the biggest thing was that I had been networking pretty hard for over 5 years at that point, and so the network I built was filled with a ton of amazing people and brands that wanted to work with me when the time was right, and so I think of myself as like a business first designer or a strategy first designer. And so, seeing these people in my network that had successful brands and stuff really inspired me and kind of made me really hungry to keep learning the game of business and seeing how much better I could get, seeing how much I could grow that network. And I had always wanted to take more of an authoritative role with my graphic design and like be able to teach my clients and lead my clients based on the knowledge that I have. And so I think that was the biggest thing that was keeping me hungry right at the beginning.
You talk about your network, and this is where I feel like your story is very interesting because your freelancing story is different right? Because traditionally, you see a lot of creative directors relying on their network before they go into freelancing, right? They're building their network through their, roles at agencies or through, their professional careers. You flipped it by DMing people cold and building your network before getting all of the experience and building a, reputation for yourself. What made you take that approach?
Yeah, I think for me, like I'm just a realist and I understood when I first started graphic design, I was pretty bad and I was pretty uneducated, but I knew that I wanted to work with big brands and people that really inspire me. So I just like kind of sat down and was like, okay, it's going to take 3 to 5 years of hard work to even get to a point where I can provide value, but it's also going to take 3 to 5 years to build a network to where I can get opportunities that I'm really excited about. So I realized like I was trying to work backwards and I realized I could do a lot of the heavy lifting early on if I prioritized building those relationships early on so that by the time anything came to fruition, my skills would then be up to speed basically. So I just kind of looked at it that way and I knew I had about 5 years of learning and developing before I could get opportunities I was really aiming for. And so I just kind of prioritized that early on so that everything would kind of line up by the time everything came to fruition, basically.
So, a big win from that strategy, Ian, is getting to work with Jägermeister. You
Yeah.
didn't, you don't just stumble upon getting to work with Jägermeister. How did that client come across your desk?
Yeah. So that does go back to the DM strategy. So basically, before I got into graphic design, I was into photography and I would make calendars with my photos, like nature photos and stuff every year. And I would just sell those to get extra money. And so when I started DMing these people, like I'm DMing pretty successful people, like out of my league type people compared to like where I wasn't even in my career yet. So I was like, how do I find a way to get the attention of these people and have them kind of like remember who I am? And so almost everyone I was DMing was either in LA or New York. And I just didn't have the resources or the time to go out there since I was in college. So I thought of the calendars as kind of a vehicle to get their attention. So I would basically send them a free calendar every year and I would leave a handwritten note and just explain to them like why they inspired me. And I would always offer free work in those notes, like I picked 10 to 20 idols. I'd send them these notes and say, hey, here's why you inspired me. If it ever makes sense and I can ever help you in any way, let me know. And so one of those people I would DM was a clothing brand called Kid Super based in Brooklyn. And to get him the calendar, I had to work with his assistant and because she was helping me with the logistics and the address and all this stuff. And so she worked there, she helped me with that. She helped me build that relationship. And then eventually she went to Jägermeister and this was around the time that I was about to start my own freelance journey after Iconic. And so what I did was I made a close friends list on Instagram with all of the connections I made over the years through the DMs. And I basically posted a private story saying, hey, if you're on this list, you're a connection that I really value and we've built a good relationship over the years. So I want to give you like first dibs to my design services when I launch my business in 2 months. And so Kid Super's assistant was now at Jägermeister. She was on that list and she was like, hey, we're looking for a contract designer. Would love to get first dibs whenever you launch your business. So yeah, that's how that kind of came to life.
That private story, that's a hack.
That is a hack. I know.
That's a hack.
I'm always trying to find a way to get creative and get into conversations that I wouldn't otherwise be able to get into. And so that was kind of my way to do that when I launched my business.
Wow. Yeah, people are going to take that after hearing about that.
Yeah, do it. I recommend it.
So, I mean, you're really hustling and really grinding then. Do you think that kind of hustle is something more designers should be embracing today?
Definitely. I think it's I mean, the job market now is even tougher than it was when I was trying to get a job at Iconic in 2020. And so I think it's even more relevant now. But I think that there's a lot of ways you can do it. I think the DM strategy, the close friend strategy, like that could definitely work. To get my job at Iconic, they didn't have any job openings, but I was like super determined to work there. And so I made like pitch decks of, hey, here's your current strategy, here's how I would do it, and kind of explained why I think this would work. And I got them on a call and I pitched them. And the first time I did, they basically told me I was off the mark, but they gave me good feedback. And so I revised my pitch, my strategy, and I came back and I basically told them, like, I'm going to keep pitching you every month until you give me a job. And so that's how I did it in a more traditional like job market sense. Um, and so I think there's plenty of ways to do it, but I think as the job market gets harder and harder, it's even more important to stand out.
So with that persistence, you've also been able to launch a brand in Target. As a designer who was an underdog in college, walk us through the moment you saw your work in such an iconic retailer.
It was surreal for sure. Like I said, I'd seen my work printed like on the side of a building or something before, but I had actually never done like a product that got launched in retail before. And so it was surreal for sure. It is definitely in one of my top 5 design moments, I would say. Like seeing it in real life like that, it was a really cool experience.
So thinking about it, you start your freelance practice in 2023, and in 2025, you help launch a brand in Target. That
Yeah.
that trajectory is crazy. So, what's the vision for your freelance practice in the next few years? How do you follow up all of this success that you've seen? Would you ever want to scale into a bigger studio?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it a lot. So I've been running my business for like 2 years now, and you know, I think the biggest thing for me is like I just want to keep improving my personal skills, especially within like branding and packaging, because those kind of categories within design, there's really no ceiling. And I really want to see how great I can get in those categories. And so that's my main focus. I have gone back and forth with kind of hiring out people under me and building a roster of designers so I can outsource. And I've actually gone as far as like I have a whole spreadsheet of designers that I've talked to that are on board with working with me, like outsourcing and stuff. And so I'm kind of ready to flip that switch if I get to that point. But the biggest thing for me is that at least 80% of my week nowadays is spent designing, which is super rare for a creative or a freelancer. Usually you're spending a lot of time on meetings and like admin work and taxes and all this stuff. And I'm lucky enough for it to be working out in the way that I spend most of my time designing, which is what I really started my business to do. And so I don't really know if I want to hire under me because if I do that, then like half my time is going to be spent project managing and managing freelancers. And, you know, that's not really why I got into business. So it's an option that I'm keeping, in my mind. But my biggest focus is developing my own skills as much as I can and seeing how good I can get kind of at my craft.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Because you hear a lot of that from like design directors too, about how they don't necessarily design as much now that they're in a leadership position. It's much more of a people management type of role.
Yeah, and that's kinda, like, not that it's not my strong suit, but I just don't have a passion in that, and it's like, I would rather be doing the actual execution instead of, like, telling someone what to do. That may change at some point in my career, but I kinda like where I'm at right now, and I just wanna keep focusing on how can I just keep getting better and better independently.
Yeah. So let's take a look back, Ian. If you could go back to the version of yourself who felt like the worst in the class, what would you tell him?
I think the biggest thing I would say is just to trust yourself. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty to get to this point. Like when I was in college, my last semester, I was taking 26 credits. I was working an internship and I was starting to freelance. So that's like over 80 hours a week of stuff that I was doing. And so, although I'm really big on work life balance now, I kind of needed to do that much work early on to be able to get to where I'm at now. And so, just trusting that it's all going to work out would probably be the most important thing I tell myself. And I'm the type of person where like optimism and being passionate about things has been kind of my north stars throughout my life. And so I would just tell myself to keep those a priority and make sure that those are always a big part of your focus.
How has the definition of success changed from when you were a student then to where you are today?
Yeah, I think when I was a student, like I just saw all these cool designs in the world. I saw these cool logos and posters and all this stuff. And I just didn't even know how to do those type of things, like I didn't even know where to start. And so back then, success for me was just learning how to make things that I thought looked cool. And so that's a lot simpler of a success metric, it's just like learning things, it's a lot more cut and dry. And so nowadays, I think success for me is a lot more abstract. It's more of a feeling. And I think my metric for that is if I'm working on projects that I think are cool and inspiring, and I'm working with people I look up to, and I'm doing it on my own terms, like that's success for me now.
I love that.
It's a little more abstract, so it's a little
Yeah.
harder to it's not as easy to, like, set goals for that type of stuff, but I think it's good for me to have success be a feeling rather than, like, a hard goal because I can find more inspiration in that, I think.
Yeah. So then for the younger designers listening, what's your advice if they feel like they're starting from zero the way you did?
I think the most beneficial mindset I ever had was making every opportunity as fun and as cool as possible, because my first freelance jobs and, like, my internship and stuff, like, it felt pretty lame and it felt pretty boring compared to, like, what I wanted to be doing. It's like working with small businesses doing social graphics doesn't feel as cool as designing a logo for a big time brand or something. And so I had to trick myself into thinking like what I was doing was cooler than it was because like that's what I needed to keep me motivated. And so between that and finding out what I was really passionate about, I think those are the two most important things for someone that's like really at the beginning of their journey, because if you don't know what motivates you, you can't leverage your time or leverage your energy in a way that's going to get you to your end goal. You're going to be kind of going somewhere without direction, which makes things a lot harder for sure.
And then final question here, Ian. Is there anything you're working on that the viewers should go check out? Anywhere they can follow you and see your work?
Yeah, I'd say projects I'm working on now that will be releasing soon. I've got some logo and branding projects I've worked on this year. So I'll be releasing those soon. And I got some more like vehicle wraps that I'll be releasing soon. So that'll be exciting to publish. And everything will be on like Instagram, LinkedIn, and my website. So all my social stuff's just my first last name, Ian Deloney. And then my website's just iandeloney.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Ian. We appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It was a great chat. I look forward to seeing the podcast.
Ian's journey is proof that you don't need a head start. You need a head down mindset. No pedigree, no perfect plan, just relentless reps in the studio, bold asks, and the courage to chase rooms bigger than your resume. From agency floors to art galleries to freelancing his way into Target, he didn't wait to be discovered. He made himself impossible to ignore. So here's my question to you. What are you building when no one's watching? What emails are you sending? What work are you shipping before you're ready? Because the next breakout designer won't be the most talented. It'll be the one who refuses to stop knocking. But what do you think of Ian's journey so far? What can you connect with? And if you like what Ian Deloney was talking about, remember, I got his links down in the description below. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. That's all I have for you. Be sure to support the show by giving this episode a like, subscribing, and of course, sharing this episode out. I've been Ziggy the Designer. If there are 2 things you need to know about me, it's that 1, I love design. And 2, I'm very opinionated. I'll talk with y'all later. Bye-bye.